Okay, everyone, it looks like everything might be live right now. I'm still getting a few things set up, and I also have one of my cats in my lap who's trying to um, slow me down. So let me get things a little set up a little more, and then I'm going to get to work here in a few moments officially. Um, but I've got my coffee, I've got my painting, and let me get my palette set up and we'll discuss what I'm doing as I'm doing it. I need to move this camera, my head's too close to it, but it's just what it is right now because I have that attached to the ceiling. There's a mount up there, so I can't easily move that. But anyway, let me go ahead and get my palette set up and we can talk through things as I am working. Today I'll be using somewhat of a limited palette, not my entire layout that I normally have, but we're going to have a pretty decent layout. I always find it helpful just to lay out my full palette, or at least what I'm going to be working on with the day. So if I need an extra color, it's right there. And it's kind of like a computer keyboard. You might not be using the numeric keypad, but you know where it is if you need it. Anyway, let me get started with some of the colors I typically use. Ultramarine blue. I'm actually going to put a little dab of this here on the side. I will tell you why shortly. Viridian. Oh dear, where did you go? Since this is kind of a new thing for me, live streaming, I don't exactly have everything right in front of me where I can comfortably grab it. So bear with me just a moment if things seem a little scattered. Anyway, Viridian. What I was grabbing just then, you all may have trouble at times opening your paint tubes. And years ago, a gift that I think I got this at Christmas. Someone gave me this wrench called the Bionic Wrench. I think this was like an infomercial item. And this thing is awesome. If you can still find this somewhere, your paint tube fits right in there and you squeeze it and all these little things close around it. Really helps you get the cap off without doing any undue stress or damage to the paint tube cap. So always keeping that handy just for those moments. All right, sorry, I had to check on something that was giving me an error message. Cobalt Violet Dark, in case I need in that family. I meant to grab my wooden paint book palette, which is over there. I had this glass one out recently on a painting just so I could keep the paint on here and keep working, but I totally forgot to switch it out. So We'll use the glass. That's okay. Magenta, Michael Harding. Alizarin Permanent. This is Gambling. Again, you can notice I use this wrench a good bit. I guess I twist these things on too tightly when I seal them. And that could be a good thing. Could also be a bad thing. Cad Red Light. This is an old Holland tube. You could use whatever interests you the most. If I wasn't in such of a hurry this morning, I may have grabbed a tube of genuine vermilion instead. Okay, and transparent red oxide is the next color I'm going to put down. This is, and the ultramarine blue that you saw me put down earlier are pretty important throughout the painting, but especially early on. I'll show you why here in a second. I'm going to put a little up top that I can keep in my palette to continue to use, but some down below for a mixture I'm going to combine here shortly. All right, this is Blue Ridge Yellow Ochre by Rublev Oil Colors. And where'd you go? Cadmium Yellow Lemon by Michael Harding. Okay. Now, one of my favorite whites that I've really enjoyed using lately is this warm white that you can get from Michael Harding as well. They call this their lead white substitute. What they mean by that is just that it is a warm white, literally, like lead white is a warm white, but this white by Michael Harding is just as much as an opaque white as titanium white. It's also as slow drying as titanium white as you could imagine, but since this painting is something that I'm a little bit of a crunch on, I'm a little concerned about some of the dryers and dry time. So I'm also going to put down lead white. This is just a tube of Cremants white. It's an old Winsor Newton. I'm not sure if they even make this anymore. I've been very fortunate through the years to have made friends with many painters, and which has been great because they share information with me and have helped me along the way. But as they have decided to hang up their palette, many have decided to pass off some of their paint to me, which has been very nice because I've been able to get some special colors that you can't easily find anymore. So the Cremants white, the lead white, I love using, but sometimes I find lead white just a little too transparent for my workflow. So what I am going to do is I'm mixing the lead white with titanium white, and what that is going to do is give me more of a opaque-ish white, but it's also going to make this a little faster drying because of the lead oxide in the paint. Those of you that are out there, if you have any concerns about using lead white, I understand your concerns, but it is a wonderful product, and I encourage you to try it out. It's just, you got to be careful when using it and be very conscious of yourself. You know, wear gloves at all times, like I do, and you know, because you don't want to get this stuff on your hands and then, you know, accidentally go eat something or even just kind of scratch your face. That's just the main things. It's just, you know, be careful so you don't ingest it anyway. The other thing is you can't sand your painting, because if you sand your painting, you run the risk of this becoming airborne and then you're inhaling it. But if you don't do those kind of things, you're totally fine. You know, lead white does get a bit of a bad rap because of obviously the toxins to it, but a lot of people use things like cadmium red, which is also very, very bad. And well, I shouldn't say bad, it's also just very toxic as well. And a lot of people aren't as concerned about that using the cadmiums, but you have to be careful. Just don't start sanding things and making things airborne. Anyway, I'm going to grab one more paint that I find pretty helpful to have on my palette. So let me grab that real quick. Since I was in college, I really had fallen in love with a paint called unbleached titanium. Some paint makers, they have it, and it's called titanium buff. This is unbleached titanium from Michael Harding. It's, you know, any color, any manufacturer of it is good. It's just a very beige white. No, not beige white. What would you call it? Kind of just a tan color. It's very neutral, and it fits the bill for a lot of what I need. Okay, so we're almost set up. So you might not be able to see it well from where I put it on my palette, but let me hold it up a little bit here. But this is the ultramarine blue and the transparent red oxide. So I can mix these two together and get a wonderful black. It's kind of a chromatic black, because the more blue you have, obviously, is cooler. The more transparent red oxide you have, the warmer it can be. So it's kind of a brown. And depending on the painting that I am going to be working on, kind of influences the amount of color I'm going to use. This, for me right now, is a little red, a little warm, so I'm going to take some more of this ultramarine blue and add it here. And what's great is these two colors are pretty transparent, obviously, with the names of transparent red oxide. And so your shadows, your dark colors, a lot of times, you want those to be transparent. They're going to be easier to use with other colors as well, with mixability. And it's going to keep colors richer. I know a lot of people, for example, use titanium white. I was kind of talking about it versus lead white a few moments ago. And one of the things that titanium white will definitely do is make your paint and the colors you use very chalky. So a lot of people, they comment to me about my paintings and say that the colors are really rich. And they're like, wait, what? How did you do that? What are you doing for your colors? And it's pretty much just limiting things that I do. I'm not using a lot of solvents. I'm not using a lot of titanium, for example. I mean, I am. Obviously, you guys saw some of the things I put down. But for the oil painters out there, you've probably noticed you're trying to mix like a lovely pink, for example, and you've got your cad red. You start mixing titanium white with it, and then all of a sudden it's no longer like this really beautiful fleshy pink color. All of a sudden it's kind of like a piece of bubble gum. It really kind of falls flat at a certain point, so you have to be careful. Anyway, I've mixed up my chromatic black that I'm going to use. Sometimes I mix this differently in a completely different way, but for today's painting, that's what I'm going to use. Another thing that's nice about that mixture, that black mixture with the ultramarine blue and the transparent red oxide, are those two paints actually dry pretty fast. You know, like what we're gonna do today will be dry tomorrow, which is awesome. It's what I want. Okay, so now we have our palette set up, and I was hoping to have this complete before the stream went live, but was juggling a lot of things this morning, so I got a little delayed. But maybe those of you that are here watching the stream, you're able to kind of get some information out of watching the palette layout. But if anyone has any questions about the colors I'm using or anything, you know, feel free to throw that out there. So those of you that have maybe watched my most recent long form video on how to transfer a photograph to an oil painting will understand what I'm doing. So I always make a 6x6 inch painting for my wife as a Christmas gift, and Christmas is around the corner, and I've been pretty busy on some work for an exhibition. Got a little delayed, but I've caught up with myself, and it's now time for me to work on her painting. And we have two lovely cats, and I thought, what better than giving her a painting of our two fur babies. So I picked out a photograph which I had taken here in my studio. It's obviously above me here on the stream. And in the long form video, I transferred that photograph to the canvas panel. And you all, if you haven't seen the long form video, you should watch that so you can understand a little bit more of this shortcut technique that I use to get my image on to the canvas. Maybe that helps if I hold it up like this to that camera. Anyway, I'll be working on a paint book by Edge Pro Gear, and this is a 6x6 inch linen panel. And if you've watched my paint book video also, you'll understand what this metal plate is. I discuss how I attach that and what that's all about, and the beauty of it as well, because boom, snaps right in place. Anyway, let's get to work. So I'm going to primarily use some pretty small brushes on this painting. And I'm probably going to start with this number 4 red Taklon brush by Trekell. And it's a round. And I'm looking to see, I picked up an awesome brush when I was in London this fall with my wife. Let me just lay a couple of these out that I know I probably will want. I picked up these Kolinsky brushes at L. Cornelson and Son in London, and they're so good. I wish I would have gotten more. I could have spent so much money there, but it, you know, you've got the problem of how do you get it home, right? All right. Oh, mediums. I've got a little turpentine I'm going to use. Start out with. I thought about using some Galkin Light, but I think I'm just going to use turp. Okay, so I always start, for the most part, with my darks. It helps me snap things in place within the painting. So I am looking at the photograph of my cats to kind of identify some of the darkest areas right now. And I'm going to just start with those. And this mixture that I have, again, like I told you earlier, it dries pretty fast, which is wonderful. What we're going to do, it's going to be very workable also. And I don't mind that it's warm. It like feels a little brown. And that actually, it works with this painting because I'm painting these two cats with fur, obviously. So I'm able to lock things in kind of fast and know that I can go back and work back into it. And if there are any questions at all, feel free to put those in chat and I'm happy to answer any. I'm going to add a little bit more ultramarine blue this here. Better. I typically will work from dark to light. I find it easier that way to build up the form. And I don't know, it's just one of those things that just makes sense to me. As I'm working, you know, I know that I can lock in the shadows, and those are going to be some of your thinnest areas of actual paint application. You know, quite often your thicker areas of paint application are going to be the lighter colored areas also. Those of you that have been into an art museum, you probably have noticed that sometimes like an older painting, for example, a Rembrandt, you might notice that there's highlights, you know, like the little white glare on an eye, the reflective light on an eye where it's very wet and shiny. It might actually be a dollop of white paint that's actually got a ridge to it, an area of impasto is what we call that, where it's actually kind of sticking up off of the surface. What happens is that catches the light from overhead. So let's say we're in a museum or a gallery space. That little light is going to catch more light and actually have like a little perceptible shadow to it. You know, just a hint. But it's optical enough that it will actually give that highlight more presence. And it's kind of a nice trick. So anyway, start with keep your shadows thin. And that's where I kind of start, obviously, like I was saying. This transfer that I did that you can watch on my YouTube channel. It's a long form video on transferring. A lot of people might look down on it and say, hey, that's cheating. But there's a lot of reasons why, to me, I'm just like, you know what, it's fine. Whenever you are an artist, an illustrator, you're working with clients, quite often you have to deliver things in a very timely fashion, and there has to be a high degree of accuracy involved. And sometimes, to me, it's whatever tools you can use to help you achieve your end goal and it be the best end goal you can get, absolutely look into these tools. Now, you might find that you have a better result by capturing like someone's essence. Like if you're a portrait painter and you're working on a portrait of someone, you might recognize that you're able to pick up on some of their like mannerisms or whatever, some of their character, just by drawing them freehand. And I think that's great. I love that. But I think it's helpful to know about other things that you can do. So in that last video that I did, I talk about it. I show you how I do this, and I discuss the idea of projected images. And I know a lot of artists will use a projector. When I was in college, we had a projector, and I experienced using it, and it works. But I think that is one of the things that will give you like a worse end product than something that I've done with this printout method. So check that out if you have not seen that for sure. I know that apologize if the image is a little blown out as I block in more contrast. Hopefully that'll become more legible. I'll try to work a little quickly so you guys have a little bit more information you can see. And you'll notice that this color that I've been discussing, this black mixture, it's just kind of working out so beautifully because it's got enough body to it, enough thickness to it that I can get an opaque area. But I can also kind of scumble it along, or if I'm using a little bit of solvent, I can get a nice thin wash or almost just kind of a scumbled on stain in the area, and it works great. And if there's any problem with it, it's going to be easy for me to go in and paint over it as I start to get into using the actual color of my cat's fur. this black mixture that I use, um, like I said, it dries kind of fast. So what we have on our palette, a lot of our colors we've laid out will actually, tomorrow when I'm back in, I might have to mix up this black mixture again. It kind of gets a skin on it. And you can use what's underneath it. Obviously, you can break it and get inside the skin. But I just don't like when my oil paint has little bits of things in it. I like to control my surface enough to know that what is in the paint is paint, not like an impasto of some bit of gunk that I wouldn't choose to be in there. Here comes one of my cats. I think she's pretty excited that she'll be in a painting. Painted her once before. And I've wanted to paint her more than that. As I talk with my wife at times about goals that I have for my art career and for my studio, sometimes I recognize that I feel a little burnt out on things. Man, I'd really like to spend more time, capturing some of the things around me that I love, my family, my friends, my home, and sometimes you're just busy kind of keeping up with a demand of things that you kind of don't do some of the things that bring you just joy, instead of it being something that is for sale. Obviously, we have to make money and pay our bills, but it's so nice to just make a painting that you're going to look at on your wall or in your studio and just love and enjoy. And the process of it, the process of making a painting, a lot of times of someone that you know and love. It's like having a moment of communion with them as you're working and spending time looking closely at someone's face and just trying to consider how to capture it. I started to paint in oils my, oh goodness, I guess it was the summer between my sophomore and junior year in college. I had the school that I went to, the painting instructors did not teach oils. They only taught acrylics. And we actually were discouraged from using oil, because of the quote unquote smell and cleanup of it and everything, which to me, to be honest with you, I find the smell of acrylic paint far worse, especially if any of you out there painted with acrylics and have not, and you've left like a bucket of water, like dirty water with brushes in it that you've been rinsing your acrylic paint in. It has a very strong ammonia smell to it. But since people, you know, consider it safer, like, oh, you can just leave it there. It's okay. Not the case. Anyway, I was, and I still am, like, in love with art history. Just love reading about other artists and works of art that are being created. And I saw these master works by artists that I loved. And they're made with oil. I'm like, wow, all right, clearly if I'm going to commit myself to painting, because that was what my concentration was in school. If I'm going to commit myself to painting, I need to learn or at least try oil paint. So I had this really kind of it was a job. It was a job. I was going to say it was a dumb job, but it was a fine job this one summer. And I was doing faux finishing and decorative murals in these very large, expensive homes in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the surrounding areas. Anyway, I was making a decent amount of money doing it. You're working as a subcontractor, and so you get paid straight up, and then like a third of the cost, and then you get another third towards the middle, and then like your final third at the end, roughly, is how I was getting paid. And it was a good bit of money, at least to a college kid. And my life at the time was all in devoted to art. That's all I was doing, was reading about art, looking at art, and painting. I didn't have any interest in like going to see movies or whatever. I guess you could say I'm boring, but I was just all about it. So I got this money, and I decided I'm going to learn oil. So I went to the art supply store, and I bought a few tubes of paint and a can of odorless mineral spirits. I'm like, all right, let's try this out. Let's figure it out. And did some really poorly done things, but man, it was so much fun, and I learned so much in doing it. And immediately said, yeah, I don't want to work with acrylic paint anymore. Like I knew that. I knew that there was something very seductive about oil paint that had gotten me, and there was no going back. Okay, I've done a good bit of some sort of small, delicate things. So I think, well, let me do the cat on the right. Let me kind of catch some information on his ear. It's a little warmer. See, this black mixture I have, you can, obviously edit it as you're working, which is kind of what I do. If something's a little warmer, I'll add more transparent red oxide. If something's more cool, I'll add more ultramarine blue as I'm working. But I kind of stay in that realm. I'm really not introducing another color at this moment. It's all just limited to those two pigments, and adjusting the temperature a little bit as I want, and maybe adding a little bit more solvent to try to just kind of break it up a little bit. I'm not sure if this is being picked up much here, this area I'm working on this cat's ear. I'm not sure if it's being picked up much on the stream, but it's very kind of scumbled on. It's not very opaquely applied here. Okay. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a thicker brush. I'm thinking something that might be a bit more of a filbert. because there's all these soft areas of the fur I want to get that have some of the markings and stripes of both of them to block in some areas. I think I'm going to use this filbert. So let me prep that, but I'm going to rinse this brush. Those of you that have seen my video on cleaning brushes, you kind of know what I'm going to do next is over here to my right. You can't see it because it's off camera, but I have a thing of OMS, which is Gamsol, and a thing of safflower oil. So just rinse that off. Now this is also OMS, Gamsol. You can't see where my hand is pointing, unfortunately, but on the right of my paint book here is a canister of OMS that I'll use to rinse between areas. I don't really like to paint with OMS, honestly, but I have it there at times when I just want to get another rinse of something off. But my recommendation is keep your lid on your OMS. That stuff can hurt you. In my opinion, your OMS is the most dangerous thing in your studio. You might not smell it, but it fills your studio with this toxic gas and depletes your studio of oxygen, actually. So keep it covered, because that right there, next thing you know, you're going to have headaches, allergic problems, could affect your cognition down the line. Definitely don't want that. All right, let's add a little bit more ultramarine blue to that mix. And this right now, as you can tell, it's kind of washy. I was putting in some of the darkest areas on the fur of the cats, and now I am there are areas that aren't as dark that I'm just trying to hit, and they're softer areas too. They're not like this area I'm trying to hit on this cat's leg, front leg is softer because of the fur. Even though there are the stripes, it's not as sharp of a line as say around her eye and nose. What I was saying about college also, with that the smell of acrylic paint, like, you know, I had gotten the at the time when I was in school, I don't think Gamsol even existed. Gamblin was a company, but I don't think it was as readily available as it is now. And so your options when it came to odorless mineral spirits were like your hardware store brand. I think maybe Winsor Newton had one that they made, but like the economical art supply store version was a product called Terpenoid, which you can still get. But I just did not like that stuff. It just had this weird smell to it that really was I just did not enjoy, and it seemed like it made my sinuses hurt after a while. I mean, I tried not to paint much with it anyway. It was mainly for cleaning brushes, but I just didn't like it. But anyway, I picked up turpentine at one point, and it just like, oh, just the smell of turpentine. A good friend of mine is a painting conservator, so when I go visit his studio, it smells like turpentine all the time because of its use in a lot of solvent mixtures, and obviously Damar varnish you know, as he like is varnishing finished work, and that smell is just like, oh, it takes you somewhere. So good. But not exactly the best thing for you. I get it, but I love it. Okay. Now, before I start to introduce some of my other mixtures, what I am going to do is I'm going to finish, like I'm working in dark areas and light, and I'm trying to recognize like certain shapes and certain lines. And to do that, just squint at your source material. My source material is the cat. Obviously, you're seeing the two cats that I have pictured on the stream. But I'm looking at certain areas now when I squint that I'm going to kind of push back with this color that's on my brush. It's super soft. Like if you guys can see that in the stream window, this is a very soft Kolinsky Sable brush, and I have a little bit of our mixture on it that we've been working with, and I'm just kind of scumbling that over. And notice that the color, excuse me, the areas where we painted before, you know, those are not being affected by my work right now, by me taking this brush and rubbing over them. Like what I have done is still remaining pretty much untouched where it was. I'm not rubbing it around. And that's because of the way this mixture that I make is functioning. And I'm also just not, you know, I don't have a brush that's drenched with solvent too. Again, I'm using the squinting technique to kind of recognize um, a shape of value. So I'm seeing the like tan color of this one cat and just kind of hitting that in those areas. Where her stripes are. You know, one area that I missed that I kind of want to hit, go back and hit, is in her whiskers. On this side of her face here, there's these little specks where the whisker is coming out. And I'm just going to hit that with a little bit of our black mixture and a little bit of solvent so I can keep my brush sort of sharp. And when I did my transfer of this image, I did a pretty good job. So I can see where those whiskers are pretty easily. And catch those. I know that you guys probably aren't able to see it with the way that the camera and the light is kind of blown out. And I apologize if you continue to visit me in this live stream. I will upgrade my my camera and my setup moving forward. But as they say, you have to start somewhere. So I'm doing this right now with the whiskers. So this can kind of soak in and set in a little bit. and then we'll go back on top of it and use the other brush to brush on, scumble on the thinner application of paint, just to give ourselves a little value of color there. But if we have this established first, it's really gonna just kind of make that whole process a little easier. I give a little hint to her mouth here. I'm kind of lightly scumbling something on there. Okay. Let me put this back in my brush holder. I don't know if I'm going to use that at this time. We're going to go back to this, what we were doing. Our solvent started to evaporate. So a little bit more, because that's starting to get a little too close to what I want. I could start adding titanium at this point. Titanium white or Cremence white, any other colors. But at this stage, I'm treating this like a drawing. I'm trying to just kind of get in my shapes and my marks and correct any other areas that are bothering me. And then when I feel pretty good about it, then that's when we're going to go in and start applying more color and form. But this is how I like to lock things in first. Again, squinting, taking time to kind of just look at it a little bit differently with a squint, and that will reduce the information down to these basics of shape, darks, and lights as well. What I'm also trying to do is, like with some of my marks I'm making at this stage, is just go with the cat's fur. You know, like if we were painting a landscape, for example, right now, we might, you know, make our marks, our brush strokes in line with the way the foliage is working as well, or the way it's being blown by the wind. You know, all of that's going to help sort of establish a level of movement. All right. Feels pretty good. Before I kind of hit the other cat, one thing I want to do is I often will like to work in an additive and subtractive way. So I have these great Q-tips that I like to use. They have a bit of a pointed tip. So I'm going to just kind of go in and kind of pull out a few areas that I want to make sure are pretty preserved in case anything got lost in the process of what we were doing. Everything looks really good, but some of the areas of her fur over here, wipe out a little bit. You could use whatever. A towel is fine, but these are handy. This 6-inch panel that we're working on, a few years ago, I was doing another project and I had several of these made, and I forget how many I used. I may have used like a dozen, and I may have made like 18 or so. So I still have some left, and they're perfect for these little gift paintings that I do, and I really enjoy the shape and size. Is actually kind of a fun thing, and and since they're cradled, they hang on a wall really beautifully, um, without a frame. Obviously, if it were just a panel, we might have to then go and get some sort of frame for that to hang on the wall, which is okay, but this is kind of nice. But this might be the last one, so I might have to make some more for next holiday or come up with some other solution. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna add a little bit of stumbling a little bit in her ears and this other part of the whisker area that we kind of went back on to a few moments ago. Okay, now I want to block in the tuxedo cat, his markings now. That's a very cool gray, as you can tell, obviously. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of give myself some blue. I could stay with that same brown mixture, and maybe I should, but I'm just going to cool it down a little bit for my own purposes. And I'm staying with this filbert brush because that cat, his markings, you know, it's more of a shape. It's not like the cat on the left who has her stripes. Cat on the right is more of a shape at this point. Whenever I'm squinting, you know, I'm seeing like darker tones, but it's essentially just a mass of where that dark gray is around his eyes, ears. This one eye is pretty much in shadow, but since we blocked in some of the shape of the eye before, it's kind of helpful because I can just stumble on top of that. The information still stays. I don't lose it. So as I continue to paint, I can still see that reference very easily. And as I mentioned in earlier, this was done as a transfer from a photograph I had taken. And I did that with an oil paint transfer. A lot of other artists use this technique, and I find it just so helpful and wonderful to use. I used to use graphite to do a similar technique, but I had a conservator years ago that had warned me about it because graphite can actually become more visible over time, surprisingly. And so you might be able to see that through the layers of oil paint, because quite often oil paint becomes a little bit more transparent over time. And so it almost seems like the graphite is migrating between layers. That's not exactly the case, obviously, but it scared me with the thought of that, because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I don't want to have some problem down the road because of a process I've used to transfer my image. So another artist had told me about this oil paint technique to transfer an image, and I love the idea of it because it's all oil paint. Your image that you're transferring is a thin layer of oil paint. You're painting on top of it with oil paint. It's all the same. And some artists also told me that they used India ink, and it's a very similar technique as well, but it's one of those things where it's like, wow, well, India ink is like really, depending on how you work, can be very dark and a very sharp mark. You're like, wow, like, could that become more visible over time? That's a little uncomfortable for me. It makes me think of Leonardo's Adoration of the Magi, because that painting has all this sort of line work that he's done. It almost looks kind of like an India ink work, and then he's applied a resin material on top of the drawing to seal it in place. Yeah. Anyway, it's something that I'm always trying to be very conscious of, is the image. Is it going to change over time? Like, that's something that makes me nervous. Like, I don't want it to change. Definitely don't want it to get any worse over time, but sometimes paintings, as they age, look beautiful. The oil becomes a little bit stickier or yellower or something. Okay, I'm pretty much finished kind of laying in some of this info, enough that we can like get going. Okay, so something else to consider for us. All right, we've got white. This cat has a lot of white fur, and she also has some white fur as well. The panel that we've worked on, this is a lead primed linen, so it's very absorbent. It's a beautiful ground to work on. But gesso, just your standard acrylic gesso or something like that would be fine as well. But due to the fact that this is a lead ground, it's got a little bit more of a warm tone to it. I did not tone this. I could apply the white right now to make some of this pop out, but I want to let this dry a little bit more, especially because there is kind of a sharp line with some of these. I want it to blur, I want it to be soft, but I don't want to quite get in there yet. So there's kind of this process of how you're building things so it layers properly. At least that's how I like to do it. What I think I want to do next is there's this rug that's around the cats that's kind of this salmon color. I want to go ahead and block that in. I'm going to use the same filbert brush, just rinse it off in this brush washer here. salmon color. I'm going to use a little bit of Terp. Kind of hit the palette with that. And I'm going to use this mixture of lead white and titanium white with a little bit of Cad Red light. And that's a little warm, so let's hit it with some alizarin permanent. That is better. I'm just going to kind of give us a color right now. Just actually, I'm gonna use some of our warm white. And kind of give us that salmon color. And what's nice is I can go up close to the cats and soften that edges. You want to give yourself a soft edge with a lot of your objects. It's more interesting that way. And especially with these cats, their fur is soft, obviously. So whenever you put a soft edge on an object, it's going to make it obviously soft, aka their fur and everything, you know. What I will do sometimes also, in case I haven't said this, is I'll think about a mid value of something, you know, like if I'm going to block in like the rug, for example, obviously there's light color that's in the rug and there's darker color in the rug. Sometimes I'll try to find something that's in between. And if you squint your eyes, you can see that a little better. So I'll get something that's kind of in the middle of all of that, so, and then put that in, because then as you go back and you start to have the shadows and the highlights, it really fills it out beautifully instead of just trying to get it right from the start. What I'm putting on now, again, it's going to dry pretty fast. Actually, a little bit of that rug here. Blanked out on some of that. So we're going to hit that there. Give us that color. And since I have this pink out, what I'm going to do, I never rinse this brush, so let's rinse that, is both cats have some pink noses. And there's a little bit of pink that's showing through in their ears because of the blood and the light that's illuminating that. So it's a very light pink. So I'm actually going to add some white to our mixture and get that going. His nose is actually pretty, it's a bit more red. And I need to add some yellow ochre to this pink mixture because it's kind of going a little orange in places. So the yellow ochre will help us get there, at least with this lock-in phase. His nose. That right there is part of her toe pad. We're not there yet. I'm gonna scumble in some of this flesh color. Let me add a little bit more yellow ochre to that mixture. But as you see, like so far, you know, I'm just blocking in, like essentially it was a drawing at first, and then we start thinking in terms of shape and a little bit of value as well. But if we started out with one color that we mix from two, and then we kind of bend that color back and forth a little bit, and then adjust it with a little bit of solvent and how we're scumbling it on, so that one mixture made of two colors again kind of gives us a pretty wide range. And then once we start to get comfortable with how that is locked in, then we start to like add a few other things. And then as you're working, at least when I'm working, you kind of enter this flow state after a period of time, and then you're grabbing more color and you're doing this and this and this, and you started out at one point just being a little bit more concerned about value, not about color. And the next thing you know, you're painting and hours have passed, and you're like, whoa, here we go. And that is the goal. All right, so the tuxedo cat, I want to hit some of the area around his nose that is a little darker. So I'm going to get our black mixture, kind of go down with some of the red that we've, and pink that we've mixed up. And get some of the areas of his nostril. I paint a bit more controlled than some people. Some people at this point, they're like slinging a lot of color, a lot of loose expressive marks. And I enjoy that, and in many ways I envy that, but it's just everyone paints differently, and I am just someone that always tried to have a certain um, degree of control at all times. You could say that is not always a good thing, but everyone works differently. Add a little bit to her nose, even though she has a very interesting nose because it's somewhat asymmetrical, and she has this black um, part of her nostril that kind of shows up, which I think is really cute. It's only on one side. And we realized that this was part of her toe pad. Or toe bean. All right, let's block in the area of the floor behind them. Oh, you know what? We missed this little part here. A little bit of white. Hit this rug that shows here. Just blocking in these shapes with very generalized local color. Okay, now what I want to do is get this flooring that's behind the two of them. It's a hardwood flooring. In the photograph, it's a very yellow green. So again, thinking of value first. Value does all the work, as you probably have heard in your art instruction classes. Value does all the work. So I'm just going to, again, stick to our black mixture that we've had. And I'm going to add some yellow ochre. And I'm going to add some of our lead white mixture to it. A little more yellow ochre. And that's a pretty good value. It's like it's kind of like a lightish brown. It's a little more warm than I want. So I'm going to put a little Viridian in it to cool it down. That feels really good, actually. There's an area of reflection here on the left. What I'll do is just kind of wipe that out. this mixture we used. It's I'm going to use it on the right side first because it's darker here, and then in the middle is kind of light like it is here. So I could wipe out that middle area as well. But I think I'm going to go ahead and lighten it by adding some of our white mixture to it. Before I do that, I'm going to wipe out this side. As you squint, you know, we're not getting into the color of it right now, but as you squint, this area here and the area there, it's actually like cool. It's actually got a blue value to it, which is kind of fun. So whenever we get into painting color or full color, I'll definitely put that in because that's a fun element. Because there's a window behind, and you know, sunlight is actually a cool color. Natural light is. Okay. That in. Oh, sorry, I had to look out the window. It looked like there was someone here. I think it's just an Amazon delivery. You know. 'Tis the season. Looks pretty good. And let me rinse this brush off. I'm going to hit that little fringe area on the carpet. Like I've been mentioning in terms of painting, like working with value first and some of these basics, another basic that is fundamental. I didn't exactly put it into practice in this painting so much, but one could have, is working back to front, because you're essentially going to be covering certain areas with something in front of it. So it's easier to get that thing blocked in behind it. And as you work on top of it, you can blend into it by working on top of it. So like his ear, for example, is over that flooring. You know, I could have brushed this flooring around and then put in his ear. And that's another way to have done it. But right now, since we're starting to get to more informative things within the painting, then it's a good idea to start to be more conscious of those things. I like to give myself something in the painting that's kind of grounding it. And for me, grounding it is some of the drawing, some of the line work, some of the value. And then once, I'm like, okay, all right, we're going somewhere. Then I can start to add the extra elements like these areas of detail. We're almost finished with certain areas of the block end of this, but what's next is we need to get the whites of their fur established. And then we're going to just kind of step aside for just a second, evaluate where we are, and then like really get going with a lot of the paint. But like I said, it's helpful to get these basics in, the understanding of some of the painting first. And while it's wet, you can get some really nice soft edges. Okay, we got that in. Feels pretty good. All right, so I want to get started with the whites of their fur. So what I'm going to do is take our white mixture. Again, this is titanium white and lead white. This is a good sort of semi-transparent color. And as you can see, I can kind of hold it up on my palette knife against the area, and you can see how white it is. Now, if we apply it, it's not going to be that opaque, obviously, that you see on the palette knife against this tone. But we can kind of scumble it on and this looks beautiful. This will dry pretty quickly as well, so it'll help with some of the buildup of things. So I'm going to start with his fur, I think. So let me rinse off this filbert brush. If there are any questions out there, please let me know. And as you can see with the white mixture that we have, like I mentioned, like if you can, I know that the way that the camera is showing up in the stream, you can't pick up on it perfectly, but you can kind of see how it's very soft and it's not very opaque the way it goes on, which I think is wonderful for doing fur and even skin tones. Now I'm just going to kind of block in some of this, but we're going to go back and start adding more information after this initial phase. But this is just a good way to establish some of the shapes and relationships. You can kind of notice that the white of the fur changes color depending on the light that it's in. It looks warmer and it looks cooler at areas, which I think is beautiful. Like if you live in an area that snows or you've been someplace that snows, look at the shadows that are cast onto white snow when you're outside. They're just a brilliant blue color. It's just one of the prettiest colors, I think, and it's very fun whenever you're drawing or painting an image like that to be able to really key up those colors. Since this white, again, since it's not fully opaque, I can see some of my transfer lines below, which is nice. So as I'm brushing this on, I can see some of the information below, and that will help me um, continue to block things in as we're moving around the painting. Taking the time to correct some areas like that shape of his markings on his face here, a little wider. Easy to fix at this moment. I meant to play some music before the stream started, but I was delayed, so I didn't get that fully set up. But once we get some of this block in established, I might try to play a little bit of music just to have something nice in the background while we're working. Like I said earlier, you know, just soften your edges as you're working a little bit. So it's really easy at this point, since I'm working with white, to kind of hit that salmon color of the carpet to correct that the way I want. Now I'm leaving some of this area blank for now on his chest near the rug, because that's like a darker value, and instead of like blocking it all in with white and then trying to go in and make it a little darker, I'm just going to get that in with a darker color. So I'm going to move on to this little cat, some of the white of her fur, paws, area around her nose as well. Here on her chest is like this nice warm color, sort of little caramel color. And since I have this mixture that's like a little brown that we put in for our drawing, it's perfect to work back into and kind of warm that area up as I'm applying our white mixture. ball stick. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me get some of the shadow area that I mentioned over here. It's kind of like obviously it's a gray, but there's a certain warmth to it. It's almost, there's a lot of reflected light from the rug, this pink salmon color, with the gray, which kind of gives it a little bit of a lavender. So what I might do is just use some of our white mixture with that pink and just continuing to use what's on our palette, just sort of hitting this this area that's here. It's important to have an organized palette. So you may have noticed that I you know, obviously it's like with a rainbow, I've got it sort of going lightest to darkest, but obviously with the color value of a rainbow in a way, so it's easy for me to navigate my palette. But whenever I'm also mixing, I try to keep things organized. So it's like the darkest things or coolest things here on my left near those things on my palette, and then sort of keeping the lighter things over here on the right, even the warmer things. And then I'll use the palette also kind of going up, might be a lighter value and darker as you move down. And you'll notice at times, maybe once we get further into the painting, that I'm starting to mix up strings of color. So I'll recognize a color that we're going to be using, and I will mix up that color and then essentially drag it down the palette with darker tones to make it dark. So I'll have like a literally like a string of color that is lighter and then darker, and I'll have several things like that, so I can keep going back and forth with my brush and getting what I need when I want it. It's going to save time while you're painting by having it organized like that. And not only is it a bit of a time saver, but it's going to make things so much more accurate because you're not like constantly having to mix up things. It's right there. You've already done the hard work in a way by mixing up the colors on your palette. And then you can just work. Again, trying to keep certain areas soft with this cat's fur. Let's see how it's really nice then when you have your gray mixture to go back in with your white or close to it, because you can get such a really nice soft transition, especially um, with what we're painting, with the texture of this soft fur. It really helps. Try not to overthink it too much. Just put down things. What's most important at this stage is that it's um, accurate. It's pretty accurate. Yeah, so it looks pretty good. So what I'm doing, you might see that I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, is the chair that I'm sitting in. It's a drafting chair, and I can kind of quickly like push it back and then squint my eyes to see if something doesn't look quite right, just by getting a little distance on it. There's all sorts of tricks you can do as an artist to see your work in a different way, to know if you need to um, adjust it a little bit more, correct areas. You know, squinting is a big one. Getting some distance on your work. It's similar to squinting in a way, because you're kind of like reducing the information that you're seeing to its essentials, getting that distance on it. But ultimately, you just want to be able to see things in a different way, because our eyes just kind of get used to seeing something one way, and they just continue doing that. And you start to see, you stop seeing any sort of problems that may exist. You have to try things a little bit differently, see them more. This white mixture that we're using, it's like kind of starting to dry in its own way. So as it does that, it gets kind of sticky. Um, you all have used stand oil in your mixtures and your paintings before. You probably have noticed that how it gets kind of sticky as it's drying, and that's kind of nice. You get these really nice effects with your paint, where you're almost like pulling the paint, and and you can kind of get some cool blending by doing that, I think. So anyway, this white mixture that we're using of the lead white, it is obviously starting to dry, and it's kind of got this stickiness as we're pulling it along. Yeah, this is looking good. This is looking good. I have a stray mark here, which I actually like. I actually like that stray mark, but it doesn't make any sense on the painting, so I need to blur that in enough that it goes away. Okay, so at this stage of the painting, I like where we are. I want to correct some of the white areas in the cat on the right with some of his face, because I'm seeing some stuff that's not quite what I want. So what I'm going to do is get a little bit more of this. I'm going to use the warm white, the Michael Harding warm white at this time. Excuse me. And a little bit of the lead white, but not much, because we already have a lot of wet lead white on the painting. So as we start to add things into our surface, which is wet, it's actually going to mix, and we'll get the benefit of the fast drying capability of lead white. There's just some areas on his face that are lighter than others, and I want to go ahead and sort of hit those at the moment. Pretty good. That's pretty good. And I want to get some area around part of his back or his side, I guess you could say. Kind of correct this a little bit. And, and then, excuse me, what we might do is take a brief break, and I might see if I can get some music going for us while we kind of do our last 30 minutes of painting on this, on our stream. Okay, I like where we are right now. So set that aside. Any questions, feel free to ask. I'm gonna try to get us some music here. There you all can see a little bit closer what we've been doing. Good. Isn't that great? Just the magnet on the Edge Pro gear, how it can stick to it. So cool. Okay. We'll have to worry about audio for our next stream. I'll look into that tonight. But that, I don't know. I don't want to interrupt things right now just to get that going. So let's keep working. We've got like 30 minutes, so I don't want to mess things up since we're on a good roll right now. All right, one of my favorite things to do is use a fan brush. Those of you that have watched Bob Ross in the past, you probably noticed he loved the fan brush and he would use it to get some happy little trees. And he could do some magical things with that fan brush. It was awesome. But what's great is it's wonderful to use for blending and softening edges. Just in general, just making things a little bit softer. So at a certain point in my painting, when I've gotten some things sort of blocked in, sometimes what I want to do, just sort of go over it and give myself just a consistent brushing and soften things that are next to one another that just kind of need to be a little bit kind of blended. Sometimes just going over things just kind of brings it together a little bit more. And also, whenever you work in an art gallery, one thing that I notice is you have your light that's coming from above that's illuminating your canvas, your paintings. If an artist has like some weird texture to it. Like there's some brush mark that they've left that's in an odd place. They may not see that in their studio, but then whenever it comes to the gallery for an exhibition and the lights on it and there's this weird texture that's there, it becomes very, very apparent. So that's something that used to eat at me a lot when I worked in a gallery, and I would see that happen and it's like, oh man, I wish they would have like figured out some way to like fix that. So I'm more conscious of it in my studio practice now. So in doing so, I often will use the fan brush to soften any brush marks that might be visible. Okay, so what I want to do is start to correct areas of this cat's face, of his dark marks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually mixing up more of a gray, a dark gray that's going to be a little bit more opaque. So what I'm using is our black mixture. Start with, I've added some more ultramarine blue to cool it down, and then I've added some of our white mixture, just so it, like titanium white, when you add that to something, it goes from whatever the color is that you have to boom, it like takes it up several value notches up closer to white just by adding a little bit. But with lead white, when you add it, it just takes it up these value ranges like step to step, which is really nice. So, and it keeps it from getting too chalky. So anyway, that's why I'm using it right now, just to help us um, get to where we need to be more accurately. To start with his ears, since that is an area that's against that hardwood floor in the background, that I might want to soften whenever I go back and reestablish that color of the flooring, which I'm going to do once we get more of his shape established. Because again, like I was saying before, like working background to foreground, it will be very helpful to kind of get some of that heat in before we get too far along. And then it starts to feel a little cut and paste, collaged on. You know, we want this to kind of feel very consistent. And that blurred effect is going to be really, really key. This area of his ears is a little darker, um, just because of how we're looking at it, with the way that the thickness of that skin and how it folds, and the way the light is not penetrating that as much. And feel free, if there's anyone that has any questions, just feel free to ask any questions. Always happy to answer anything. And you can see that inside of his ear, there's an area where there's more shadow. Try to catch that. It feels like it's a little warmer than what I have on my brush right now. So I'm just scumbling on what I have at the moment, just so I can catch that information before I lose it. Visually, I'm there, so I'm wanting to gather some of that. He's got this fur that kind of goes along, almost lining up with the back of his head. So I'm just moving along my brush there, kind of in the direction of that hair inside of his ear. And remember, the inside of his ear we painted with sort of a pink color. That is still wet, obviously. Not hugely wet, but it's, it's workable, so it's all blending as we're moving along, which is kind of nice. This cat, his his eyes are green, so I definitely don't want to get too far along before I block in a little bit of that color. So I might do that. I will do that before our stream ends, just so that can start to meld with some of the other surrounding colors. You know, we want everything to feel like a unit where there's a light and a shadow that is all part of the same thing. This eye, his left, our right, is pretty in shadow. So there's not a lot of information that we're seeing, but I can see enough that I'm going to go ahead and just register some of that. And then as we start to use our bigger brushes and throw some other things in there, I'll definitely knock all this back. All right, I'm going to get a bigger brush. I don't know if I want to use that filbert. This is a round number 4. Feels kind of big for a 4. I was going to say it was a 6 until I read the handle. I'm going to block in some more of the cat's tuxedo markings, but my gray mixture had started to set up a little bit more than what I wanted. So just mixing up a little bit more. Make it very brushable. But as you can see, I like to work with these colors that are a little thinner, might even be a little bit faster drying, instead of just like getting a thick, opaque paint and hitting it. Like this is a dark gray essentially. Like his fur is almost like this gunmetal color. So, you know, one could just kind of get that with a black and titanium white or whatever. Just mix up like a heavy gray. But with the way that I work, I just don't want things to get that heavy that fast because things get very chalky once they do. They also are like a little difficult to blend the way I like because it becomes so opaque quickly. And titanium white is very slow drying paint. So that's why I use what I use and I like the way it is. And this helps me block in what I want to block in and correct any areas before everything gets too far ahead of us. Like I think everything's in a really good condition right now. And those of you that have been watching since the beginning, you saw how things were very much just a drawing. You know, it was the transfer lines that we had. So it was just a contour line drawing essentially of these shapes for the cats. And as we've worked today for the past couple hours, we've taken those lines and we've given them form and value and even some color, and it's all like essentially blocked in, covered up. Like what we started with is no longer visible, really. And I that's why I like to work this way, is because it's just oil paint. And everything we're doing right now, it's going to be dry tomorrow whenever I pick this up again. I might paint on this some more after lunch, which is coming up soon, but I'm not going to like be pushing this like we've been pushing it the past couple hours. I might just kind of work a little in the background, resolve some of those areas, um, and kind of get some stuff in that I want to make sure is softened. As you paint more and more, you know the way that you work and the way that the paint dries and stuff. You kind of know when to leave something for the day or where to leave something for the day. You might say, okay, I need to um, resolve that area before I go away, because if I come back, it can be dry, and then if it didn't, if it's too dry and I have to continue to work in that area, it might not look uniform. So you kind of have to know when and where to stop. So I'm going to evaluate that after lunch. We'll cut the stream here soon, and then I'll take lunch and come back and look at this. I'm also going to look at this stream and see if I can get a better image quality for us and a better way to get audio, because I want to have some fun ambient music for us just to have while we're working. Lighten that a little bit more than I thought. hit some white now, using some of that titanium white in the darker areas now, and it gives us a nice gray color. Perfect. And it's just beautiful during this stage of the painting while it's still wet in this area. Kind of hit this. Nice. And it can help us pull out things. You know, like there's that area of his eye where the top of the brow, it kind of like bends down. So we can kind of catch the top of it, but leave some of it dark so it still continues with that shape of his brow line around that eye on our left, his right. And it goes up towards the ear a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same on this right eye, our right. And then I'll probably end the stream and get ready to take my lunch. And I might work on this a little bit more after lunch and see if I can correct some of these first stream issues that we've had, make it a bit better for the next one. Okay, I think that's a good place to call it for now. I think we got a good bit. Hold this up to the camera so you guys can see a little bit better. I'll try to fix some of these problems so our next stream is a bit more engaging and fun to watch in terms of what you can see on the camera, and give us some fun audio. Anyway, thank you all for being here and watching the stream. I really enjoyed this, and this is going to be a great painting and a great gift for my wife. I can't wait to finish this and show it to her. But anyway, you all get back to work. I'm going to get some lunch and then work on this some more. And I might stream tomorrow, but definitely on Thursday. So I'll put some information out about that in case you would like to join me. Thank you, everyone. Take care.